let's talk about getting a second opinion, whether it's for some type of medical condition or whatever. An effective treatment solution to a medical problem should not give you another health problem. There are always risks involved, there's side effects. So you really want to make sure you're getting the correct solution to your problem. So getting a second or a third or fourth opinion is really just expanding the amount of data that you have so you can evaluate more effectively. Now, there's two things I want to mention. When you evaluate, you have to have good data. You can't have false data. You also have to have all the data to evaluate. You can't have missing data. And I want to relate this to a recent situation that I ran into with a friend who had this condition called spondylolisthesis, which is a fracture in the lower back. A lot of people actually have this condition where the vertebra, like the lumbar vertebra, should be aligned, but what's happening, it's shifted forward because the back part is fractured. So then the spinal cord can pinch in the back part. It's called spondylolisthesis. And so he got it from an old injury. He fell on his tailbone and apparently created a fracture, didn't know it. Then later in life, he had back pain. He didn't know what it was. He had an x-ray, and sure enough, he had this condition. You have to realize that there's a lot of ligaments and tendons and muscles that hold that in place. And so there are certain levels or grades of having this condition from grade 1, 2, 3, or 4 when it gets really, really severe. And so anyway, he had this condition. He went to the doctor. And he wanted a second opinion from me. I looked at his x-rays. It was a grade 1. It was not majorly severe, and he had some mild symptoms, and he was going to physical therapy. And the doctor said, you better get the surgery or you're going to be a cripple. He said the surgery is totally safe, and the physical therapy is not really long lasting. So that was the data he had to evaluate. And so when you evaluate, you need to have all the information available. And the problem is with you doing research, you might Google it, but you might not find it in the first 5 pages. You have to dig deep because sometimes this data is buried. But here are some of the missing data that I told him. Number one, just from experience working with tens of thousands of people, I've ran into quite a few people with this condition. And there are certain exercises that can majorly help this condition, which, by the way, I will do a separate video on. And these exercises can stabilize that condition to the point where the person could literally be without pain. Now, it is true that the complications from surgery is rare. However, there are other things that could definitely increase the risk of getting these complications. Number one, if you're a smoker, well, guess what? He's a chain smoker. Number two, if you have arthritis, well, guess what? He has massive arthritis through his entire spine. So the risk of some of these complications are definitely higher. Now, the other piece of information that I gave him so he can correctly evaluate what the doctor told him as far as success level, well, in my book, doesn't seem to be that successful or effective. But when you actually look at the studies, it was 73% successful. So what does that mean? You have a 73% of having a successful surgery. What about the other percentage? What happens with that? Is there permanent damage? What type of side effects? Is it really going to be safe enough not to give you another problem? Could there be any accident where the person is permanently paralyzed? That was the question I want to know, and that potentially could happen too. So a 73% success rate, especially when he's getting therapy and he's almost pain-free, just does not make sense. And I also told him this, anytime a doctor is using fear to motivate you, that's not a good motivating factor. You should just give that patient all the data so they can truly evaluate based on true information and having all of the data there. Now, I want to mention one more point when you evaluate something. Sometimes the patient is invalidated or made wrong for looking at another viewpoint or another opinion. And I think that's definitely not okay as well. So let's say they want to look at alternative care or nutrition or a different diet. that is sometimes invalidated as something that's quackery, or it has no scientific basis, or the science is settled and you shouldn't look at that or even consider that. And I say that because when you start to really look at research and how much corruption there is, I mean, it's incredible. The problem is most people cannot comprehend the research. And so they're always getting secondhand information by getting some interpretation or an opinion from the actual research. Because, I mean, when I even read certain research on keto, for example, and you find out the research was an observational study based on a questionnaire, or that the so-called ketogenic diet really wasn't a ketogenic diet, it was actually a high carb diet with high fat. So you really have to have all the data, make sure it's factual, make sure that there's nothing missing in order to make the best decision. All right, thanks for watching.
Before you go real quick, I have a course entitled How to Bulletproof Your Immune System. It's a free course. I want you to take it. And here's why. Here's you. Here is your environment. Everyone is focused on this over here, avoiding your environment. But what about here? What about strengthening your immune system? That's what's missing. This course will show you how to bulletproof yourself, and so you can tolerate and resist your environment much better by strengthening your own immune system. I put a link down in the description right down below. Check it out and get signed up today. Hey, before